In the endless silence of space, Earth had finally learned to live without war. After centuries of fighting among themselves, humans had turned their eyes toward the stars. They built ships that could cross light years and cities that floated on strange worlds. Over time, they joined something bigger, the Galactic Union, a great alliance of thousands of alien races. It was a place where peace was made through fear and balance. To most species in the Union, humans were just newcomers. They were small, fragile, and emotional. Many aliens believed humans wouldn't survive long in the harshness of deep space. Yet humans had a stubborn spark inside them, something that no one could quite understand. A mix of curiosity and defiance that kept them exploring the unknown. The human colonies spread across dozens of planets, and among them was a mining world called Erebus 9. It wasn't a famous place, and just a cold, dark rock circling a dying red star at the edge of known space. The planet had little life, but it had something more valuable: minerals that could power ships and weapons. A small group of humans lived and worked there. They were engineers, miners, and scientists, proud of their small home at the edge of the galaxy. They joked about being forgotten by Earth, but deep down they liked their peace and the beauty of the quiet nights, when the red star painted the horizon in blood-like light. One day, everything changed. It began as a normal shift in the mining tunnels beneath the planet's surface. The workers noticed strange readings, energy spikes that made their scanners blink with static. At first they thought it was a fault in the machinery. Then they began to hear sounds, faint whispers coming from the deep tunnels like someone calling from far away. Commander Jalen Ward, the head of the outpost, ordered a full inspection. He was a man of reason, not fear. But when his team returned from the tunnels, they were pale, silent, and shaking. They said they had seen shadows that moved against the light, and shapes that didn't belong to this world. Within days, the colony's communication systems began to fail. Power drained from the reactors even though the fuel levels were full. Lights flickered across the settlement, and equipment started malfunctioning in strange ways. At night, people reported seeing glowing figures outside their domes, figures that vanished when approached. Some said they felt the air itself vibrating, as if the planet was alive. Ward tried to stay calm, sending encrypted reports to Earth and the Galactic Council. He received no answer. The colony was alone. Then the first attack came. It was quick and silent. The outer mining station stopped responding. When a rescue team arrived, they found the facility empty. Every system had been shut down, and every piece of metal looked as if it had been melted from the inside. There were no bodies, only blackened walls and claw marks that didn't match any known creature. The miners began to panic. Ward ordered everyone to stay inside the main dome and prepared to send a distress signal, an SOS. He didn't know if anyone would hear it, but he had no other choice. As the engineers worked on the signal, the colony's skies began to change. The red sun dimmed unnaturally, and the stars disappeared behind a strange dark mist. The planet's sensors went blind. People gathered near the control room windows, staring in fear as the darkness grew thicker, swallowing the horizon. Then came the sound, a deep, low hum that echoed through every metal wall. It wasn't mechanical. It felt alive. The lights went out completely and the emergency alarms screamed. The creatures had come. No one ever saw them clearly. They were not solid, not fully visible. They moved like living shadows, twisting and flickering, devouring anything that gave off energy. Lasers didn't hurt them. Bullets passed through them. Every time someone fired a weapon, the light from the blast seemed to feed them instead of stopping them. People screamed as their flashlights died one by one, leaving only the faint red glow of the emergency lights. Commander Ward fought to protect his people, but one by one, the colonists vanished into the darkness. In the command center, Ward's remaining team managed to power the transmitter long enough to send out a final message. The recording was filled with static screams and a desperate voice repeating the same words over and over. "They're coming. God help us all." That was the last thing anyone from Erebus 9 ever said. On Earth, deep in the communication arrays of the human space agency, an operator received the faint distress call. The message was broken, barely understandable, but it carried the universal SOS code. Within minutes, the signal was forwarded to the Galactic Union headquarters, but it had already traveled too far through the void, bouncing off countless satellites and relays. Parts of it were corrupted, others missing. All that remained clear were the words, "They're coming." In the halls of the Galactic Council, alien ambassadors gathered to analyze the transmission. They discussed probabilities, possible equipment failures, and environmental causes. None of them believed the humans on Erebus 9 had truly discovered something new. Some even laughed, saying humans had probably caused their own disaster with poor safety measures. They panic easily, one alien delegate said. It's their nature. And with that, the council decided not to send help. It was too far, too costly, and too dangerous. The humans were on their own. Back on Earth, scientists tried to clean and decode the signal. They played it again and again, trying to find clues in the static. Some heard strange background noises, a deep vibration that didn't match any machine, and a whisper-like tone that seemed almost alive. A few experts believed it wasn't just a human voice on the recording. There was something else mixed in, something that sounded like a reply from the darkness. As news spread among the colonies, fear began to grow. Families with relatives on Erebus 9 demanded answers. Journalists asked why the council refused to act. And while politicians debated, President Aria Lennox sat in her office staring at the broken message. She couldn't stop thinking about the fear in that voice, the desperation behind those words. To her, it wasn't just a failed mining colony. It was a warning. Meanwhile, in the emptiness of space, the ruins of Erebus 9 drifted in silence. The mining tunnels were cold, filled with dust and echoes of what once was. The colony's domes were cracked open, their lights long dead. But sometimes, when the dying red star flickered weakly, strange shadows moved among the wreckage, shapes that didn't belong to the planet or to the people who once lived there. The SOS kept traveling, repeating endlessly across the void, reaching far beyond human space. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the galaxy, ancient civilizations that had seen too many wars listened to that small, broken message. Some dismissed it, others stayed silent, but a few, the oldest ones, remembered something from their own forgotten histories, something that sounded very much like the warning from that dying human world. And so, what started as a simple mining problem on a lonely planet became the first sign of something the galaxy hadn't felt in ages. Fear. Not fear of monsters, not fear of darkness, but fear of what might happen when humanity was finally pushed too far. The SOS from Erebus 9 was not just a call for help. It was the first echo of a storm that was yet to come. The SOS from Erebus 9 kept traveling through space for days, jumping from one communication relay to another, until it finally reached the Galactic Council headquarters. The Council was a giant floating city in orbit around a white star, where thousands of alien species gathered to make decisions for the galaxy. In its shining towers, messages arrived every second from every corner of known space. Reports of trade, research, exploration, and sometimes cries for help. But when the faint human SOS appeared, no one paid much attention at first. The transmission was weak, full of static and missing most of its data. Only a few words were clear. They're coming. God help us all. To most of the council, it sounded like another human mistake, another accident far out on the edge of nowhere. Inside the chamber, the representatives of the major species gathered to discuss it. The tall crystalline Thalorians, who saw themselves as the wisest beings in the Union, dismissed it immediately. One of them stood and said, "The humans are emotional. Their fear always blinds them. It is not the first time they have mistaken shadows for threats." The scaled, cold-blooded Vornix delegates agreed. They argued that the Erebus 9 colony was outside safe zones anyway, and that the council could not waste resources chasing ghosts. Their voices filled the hall with dry logic, supported by others who preferred comfort over danger. Only a few minor representatives suggested sending a small scout team, but even they were quickly silenced. To the great powers of the Union, humans were still too young, too reckless, too small to matter. The council decided with a single vote, no intervention. The message would be logged, filed, and forgotten. Far away on Earth, things were very different. In a large room filled with flickering screens, a team of human scientists listened to the same SOS again and again. The signal had been broken apart, analyzed, and cleaned, but the fear in the voice still sent chills through everyone who heard it. Commander Jalen Ward's name was on the transmission log, and many of the scientists knew him personally. He was known for his calm nature and sharp mind. If a man like him sounded terrified, it meant something terrible had happened. President Aria Lennox was called to the Situation Room. She was a strong woman with gray hair tied back neatly, famous for her calmness even under pressure. She listened quietly to the SOS and then turned to the scientists. "How long has it been since the signal left Erebus 9? She asked. "About 19 days, one of them replied softly. "By now the colony might be gone." Her face didn't change, but her eyes hardened. "And the council?" "They refused to send help," said another. "They called it an internal human matter." For a long moment no one spoke. Outside the large glass window, Earth spun slowly, blue and beautiful, beneath the stars. Arya looked at it and said quietly, "We built this peace with our hands. We joined their union to prove that humans could stand among the stars as equals. But if they will not help us when we cry for help, then what is the worth of their peace?" The officers in the room exchanged uneasy glances. Sending a fleet without permission from the council was against the union's code. It could be seen as an act of rebellion. But Arya's mind was already made up. She stood straight and said, "Prepare a response team. We're going after our people." Within hours, orders spread through the human colonies. Ships were recalled from patrols, crews were summoned, and weapons were loaded. The mission was named Operation Return. The plan was simple. Send a small but powerful fleet to Erebus 9, investigate the source of the SOS, and rescue anyone who might still be alive. It was risky, maybe even suicidal, but humanity had never backed down from the unknown. When news of the fleet reached the Galactic Council, shock and laughter spread through the chambers. "Foolish," the Thalorian delegate said. "They will go and die for dust." Others agreed. Some even predicted that the humans would never return. Still, a few species watched in silence, species that had once been brave like humans long ago, before fear had turned them into cautious diplomats. They saw something in the humans that reminded them of their lost courage. As the fleet prepared for departure, millions on Earth watched from home. Families stood by screens holding hands, praying for those leaving. The soldiers who volunteered knew they might not come back, yet their faces were calm. They weren't driven by pride or orders. They were driven by something much deeper, the unshakable need to protect their own. The flagship Soul's Wrath led the expedition. It was one of the newest battleships in the fleet, long, sleek, and powerful. Its commander, Admiral Rhys Kalin, was known for his iron will and quiet discipline. He had lost his brother in the early colonization wars and had sworn that no human would ever be left behind again. Standing on the bridge, he looked out at the stars and said to his crew, "They think we're weak. Let's show them what humans do when family calls for help." The engines roared to life, lighting up the dark void with burning trails. One by one, the ships disappeared into the folds of hyperspace, leaving behind the blue glow of Earth. For days, the fleet traveled through uncharted systems, crossing the borders of known space. Communication with the Council was cut. The deeper they went, the more unstable the signals became. Strange energy readings appeared on their scanners, and faint whispers filled their communication lines. Echoes that made no sense, voices that seemed to come from nowhere. The younger soldiers joked about ghosts in space, but even their laughter sounded nervous. On the 6th day, one of the smaller ships, Pathfinder, detected faint energy traces matching Erebus 9's beacon. Excitement spread through the fleet. They were close. But the signal wasn't coming from the surface, it was floating in space, slowly drifting toward them. The Pathfinder moved closer and found it was a destroyed communication satellite. Its surface was covered in black residue, and parts of it were melted as if burned by invisible fire. The crew retrieved its data core, hoping for information. But when they connected it to the system, the ship's lights flickered and an ear-piercing sound filled the bridge. The words "they're coming" played again and again in the darkness, distorted and broken. The fleet pressed on. Finally, Erebus 9 appeared on their scanners, a dead world orbiting its dying red sun. The planet looked wounded, its atmosphere filled with thick ash clouds. From orbit, they could see the remains of the colony domes, shattered and burned. There were no signs of life, no signals, no power readings, only silence. The fleet spread out, sending smaller teams to investigate. On the Soul's Wrath, Admiral Kalin ordered all systems on full alert. He could feel something was wrong. Even though the sensors showed nothing, he felt a presence, like being watched. Back in the Galactic Council, reports of the human fleet's progress began to arrive through spy networks. Some council members were angry. demanding punishment for humanity's defiance. Others grew quiet as they realized the humans were truly going through with it. For the first time, the galaxy saw that humanity was willing to stand alone, even against fear itself. As the investigation on Erebus 9 continued, the human teams found evidence of something strange: black scars on the planet's surface that seemed to absorb light, equipment melted from within, and signs that the colony's power cores had been drained completely. The scientists were puzzled. No known weapon or creature could do such a thing. When they played the final recovered log from Commander Ward's base, the bridge went silent. The video was blurry, but his terrified face was clear. "If anyone finds this," he said, breathing hard, "don't come here. They eat the light. Stay away." The screen went black. Admiral Kalen closed his eyes for a moment, then said quietly, "We came for answers. Now we have a reason to fight." The fleet prepared to leave orbit, but before they could, one of the ships detected movement on the far side of the planet. Something large, something alive. The dark shape appeared only for a second, but the readings were impossible to understand. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a life form. It was something in between. And while the fleet stood ready, unaware of what was waiting in the shadows, the rest of the galaxy watched from a distance. For the first time, the old powers of the Union began to feel uneasy. The humans had ignored their orders, crossed forbidden space, and faced the unknown without fear. Whatever they found on Erebus 9, the galaxy knew one thing for certain: humanity would never be the same again. And neither would the galaxy. The human fleet hovered in orbit above Erebus 9, its engines quiet, its crews tense. From space, the planet looked like a scar on the galaxy, dark and broken, with red clouds swirling over the surface. The colony's domes were shattered, their metal walls twisted and blackened as if something had raged through them with unimaginable power. The first landing teams were cautious, moving slowly across the barren surface, scanning for life, danger, or anything at all that might explain what had happened. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the ships and the wind blowing across the dead landscape. Commander Jalen Ward's final log had been disturbing enough, but nothing in it prepared the humans for the reality. As the soldiers moved deeper into the wreckage, the air felt wrong, heavier than it should have been, almost alive. Their lights illuminated nothing but blackened debris, and yet shadows seemed to shift just beyond the edges of vision. Sometimes crew members swore they heard whispers, low and distant, like the echoes of screams. When asked, most claimed it was only nerves, fear playing tricks on them. But deep down, even the bravest knew something unnatural was here. They split into smaller teams, carefully moving across the mining colony's ruins. Every building they entered was a scene of chaos. Equipment had been torn apart, walls scorched, floors melted from below, and doors ripped from their hinges. It was clear no human hand had caused this destruction. The crews found traces of organic matter, but it was unrecognizable, charred, twisted, almost as if it had been consumed and then returned to the planet. Each step forward increased the tension. Every team communicated constantly, reporting strange noises, flickering lights, and the unsettling sensation of being watched. In the central command dome, a group of scientists finally located Ward's escape pod, the only survivor of the original Erebus 9 crew. They carefully pried open the hull and found him barely conscious, his body battered, armor shredded, and face pale with exhaustion. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he whispered was, They're not like anything you know. They feed on light. Everything that shines, they take." The human medics worked quickly to stabilize him, while Ward struggled to tell what had happened. His memories were fragmented, panic and trauma clouding his words. He repeated the same phrases over and over, trying to describe the creatures that had destroyed the colony, but no language could contain the horror he had witnessed. The scientist connected the escape pod to the fleet's main systems and began downloading Ward's logs. As the data transferred, images filled the monitors. Black, shifting forms moved across the colony's halls, slinking through walls, swallowing everything in their path. Structures that once held energy now appeared dead, as if the creatures had fed directly from the power cores, leaving only cold, twisted metal behind. The logs showed Ward and his team running through the tunnels, firing at shadows that seemed to dissolve when hit. His words on the audio repeatedly warned of one terrifying fact. These beings were not bound by matter, by the rules of life the humans knew. They were something else entirely. Something that could exist between dimensions, slipping in and out of reality at will. As the fleet analyzed the data, anxiety spread through the command ship. Crew members who had volunteered for this mission thought they were prepared for danger, for pirates, for hostile aliens. But this was different. Nothing they had trained for could match what Ward's logs revealed. Scientists ran simulations trying to understand how to fight creatures that consumed energy rather than matter. Soldiers ran drills, but every exercise felt inadequate. The fear was tangible, but so was determination. Humanity had come too far to leave one of their own behind. Meanwhile, the fleet began scanning the planet more systematically. Drones were sent into the tunnels and mining shafts, but many were lost immediately. Their signals became scrambled, cameras going dark mid-flight. Some returned showing strange, distorted images and shadows stretching unnaturally, flashes of movement that could not exist in normal space. Crews reported hearing low, vibrating hums that seemed to react to the drone's lights. It was as if the creatures could sense energy from afar, drawn to anything that shone, feeding on it silently. Admiral Rhys Kalin convened the fleet's commanders to discuss what they had discovered. Maps of the colony were projected, showing blackened corridors, melted equipment, and areas where the energy levels had been completely drained. "Whatever did this," Kalin said, "is not like any enemy we have faced. It is fast, intelligent, and it survives by consuming what sustains us. Lights, energy, life itself. We must adapt quickly or we will lose every team on the ground." The officers nodded gravely, realizing the mission had turned from a simple rescue into a fight for survival and knowledge. The surviving human teams began moving carefully through the tunnels, marking each path and noting signs of the creature's presence. They found claw-like marks scorched into walls, scorch marks from energy discharges, and strange residues that defied analysis. One scientist theorized that the creatures could manipulate light and energy, making it impossible to trap or track them with conventional methods. Soldiers carried special reflective armor, hoping to confuse them, and lights were dimmed or shielded to avoid attracting attention. Every team member learned quickly that even the smallest misstep could be fatal. During one mission, a squad entered a central processing hall where the power generators had once hummed with life. The room was cold, dark, and silent. Sensors detected faint energy traces, but the air felt like it was being drained of warmth. Suddenly, a massive shape flickered into view, black, shifting, almost liquid in form. The soldiers fired, but the beams passed through it as if it weren't solid. The shape disappeared as suddenly as it appeared, leaving behind only a faint trail of scorched dust. The squad retreated, shaken but unharmed. It became clear that fighting these beings required more than weapons. It required strategy, patience, and nerves of steel. As days passed, Ward slowly regained strength and began giving more detailed accounts. He described how the creatures had attacked the colony in waves, always moving silently, always feeding, and always leaving no survivors. The few who tried to fight back were quickly overwhelmed, their weapons useless. He spoke of corridors filled with black mist that seemed alive, of lights that flickered out as the creatures approached, and of the chilling sensation that the creatures could see everything, even through walls. His descriptions terrified the fleet, but they also gave humanity something they had not expected: understanding. Knowledge of the enemy, however limited, was a weapon in itself. The fleet began coordinating a search pattern, mapping the destroyed colony, recovering data cores, and collecting samples of the black residue. They found fragments of the miners, tools, melted circuits, and bits of personal belongings, reminders that real people had lived here, and that their lives had been cut short by forces beyond imagination. Ward guided the teams through the tunnels, pointing out areas where the creatures had been most active and sharing strategies for survival. Slowly, the humans began to understand the patterns. The creatures attacked energy sources first, then anyone attempting to escape, always avoiding direct confrontation unless necessary. Despite the horror, a strange resolve settled over the fleet. Humanity had always faced the unknown with courage, whether on Earth, in wars, or in the first days of colonization. Now, faced with a threat unlike anything else, That courage transformed into fierce determination. They knew they could not allow Erebus 9 to become another forgotten planet, another cautionary tale. They would face these creatures, learn from them, and survive. And if they could not, they would at least make sure that the galaxy knew the price of underestimating humanity. The human teams moved carefully but relentlessly, retrieving data, recovering Ward's logs, and analyzing the remnants of the colony. Every step revealed more about the creatures, how they moved, how they attacked, and how terrifyingly intelligent they were. The soldiers trained themselves to react to shadows, to anticipate where energy might be drawn, and to never, ever shine their lights unnecessarily. Even the smallest mistakes could be deadly. At night, when the teams rested in secure areas of the colony, they whispered about what they had seen. Some talked about the shadows as if they were alive, almost sentient, with minds and motives beyond comprehension. Others were silent, unable to forget the screams they had heard on the recorded logs or the eerie feeling that something was watching even when they were alone. Fear was constant, but it was tempered by unity. They shared stories, checked each other's equipment, and kept watch in shifts. As the days wore on, the human fleet realized that Erebus 9 was not just a place of death, it was a lesson. The Miham planet had taught them about the limits of their technology, the fragility of their bodies, and the necessity of courage in the face of the unknown. Ward's fragmented memories guided them, while the logs and sensors slowly painted a picture of what they were up against. And although no one could see the creatures clearly, everyone understood one truth: the humans were not here to die. They were here to survive, to learn, and to prepare for what would inevitably come next. Through it all, the whispers, the shadows, and the constant threat became almost a test of character. Every soldier, scientist, and officer learned that Erebus 9 was more than a destroyed colony, and it was a proving ground. And as they moved deeper into the tunnels, closer to the heart of the destruction, they knew that whatever they faced, humanity would not retreat. They had answered the SOS, and now they would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The struggle on Erebus 9 was not just a battle for survival, it was the beginning of something greater. Humanity was learning what it truly meant to face the unknown, to stand against forces that defied understanding, and to fight for their own in a galaxy that had so far underestimated them. With each step, each recovered log, and each shadow that flickered just out of reach, the humans grew stronger, not just in body or weapon, but in spirit. And that strength, forged in the darkness of a dead planet, would one day echo across the stars, announcing to the galaxy that humanity was not to be dismissed or underestimated. The human fleet had been on Erebus 9 for days, carefully investigating the ruined colony, recovering Commander Ward's logs, and mapping the blackened tunnels. The deeper they went, the clearer it became that the creatures that had destroyed the colony were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. They were fast, intelligent, and utterly alien, feeding on light and energy in ways that no weapon could touch. Soldiers learned quickly that conventional tactics were useless. Lasers passed through the creatures harmlessly. Explosions seemed to invigorate them rather than harm them. Even protective shields could not stop them from draining power from ships or equipment. Every engagement taught humans something new, but it also reminded them how fragile they really were. Fear was everywhere, but it also sparked a deep, burning determination. Humanity could not ignore this threat, and they would not run. Back on Earth, President Aria Lennox and her advisors watched the transmissions from the fleet in orbit. The data was terrifying. Live feeds showing shadows moving in ways that defied physics, sensors reporting energy being absorbed into nothing, and soldiers communicating about brief glimpses of forms that vanished before they could even react. Yet Arya's mind was calm. She understood something that few others did. Fear was temporary, but human willpower, intelligence, and unity could accomplish incredible things. She began giving orders to mobilize the full human fleet. Ships that had been stationed for exploration, defense, and trade were recalled. Every battleship, every fighter, every crew capable of war was sent into the outer sectors. Humanity had faced threats before, but this time it wasn't just about survival. It was about showing the galaxy the consequences of underestimating them. The human commanders, led by Admiral Reese Kalin, prepared for action. Their first objective was to finish the investigation on Erebus 9 and confirm the full extent of the threat. They used Ward's insights to track the creature's movements, avoid ambushes, and set traps using energy sources as bait. It was a slow, painstaking process. Small teams were sent deep into the tunnels, while others secured the surface and maintained orbital defenses. The soldiers became experts in stealth and patience. They learned to move without making sound, to manipulate light to confuse the creatures, and to conserve energy. Every recovered log, every observation, every narrow escape added to the understanding of these monsters. Even with these precautions, the creatures were relentless. On several occasions, shadowy forms would attack supply convoys, disabling drones and vehicles in minutes. Soldiers reported seeing forms that shifted shapes, spreading across walls and floors as if the planet itself were alive. The creatures seemed to anticipate human actions, avoiding direct confrontation until it suited them, then striking with deadly precision. Each encounter strengthened human resolve, but it also revealed that these beings were capable of destruction on a scale far beyond what humans had faced. They were not merely animals or predators, they were intelligent hunters capable of strategy and adaptation. Despite the danger, humanity refused to retreat. Ward, now recovering, led reconnaissance teams into the tunnels to gather more data. He remembered the layout of the colony, the energy patterns, and the areas where the creatures had attacked most fiercely. Using this knowledge, they devised a plan to lure the creatures into a controlled area on the surface, where the full fleet could engage them without risking the lives of small teams. The plan required precision, timing, and the courage of every soldier and officer involved. At the same time, Earth prepared for an escalation beyond Erebus 9. The President authorized the creation of specialized weapons capable of exploiting the creature's weaknesses: energy disruptors, reflective shields, and light traps designed to confuse and contain them. Scientists worked day and night analyzing every sample and every log from the colony. They discovered that the creatures, while powerful, relied heavily on energy absorption. By manipulating light and energy in controlled ways, humans could create zones where the creature's powers were neutralized. This gave the fleet a fighting chance, and with that chance came hope. The first major confrontation began when a group of creatures, drawn by energy activity on the surface, emerged from the tunnels. The soldiers waited patiently, hidden behind shields and debris. When the creatures appeared, the humans triggered traps that flooded the area with energy patterns designed to confuse and immobilize them temporarily. The creatures reacted with speed and fury, twisting and shifting in ways no one had predicted. But the humans held their ground. Soldiers fired controlled bursts, aimed to divert attention rather than destroy, while the scientists monitored and adjusted the energy traps. It was a delicate balance, and mistakes could have been fatal. As the battle continued, the fleet realized something astonishing. The creatures, while formidable, were not invincible. They reacted predictably when confronted with certain energy patterns, and their need to feed made them take risks. Humans for the first time saw openings, ways to exploit weaknesses without engaging in direct combat. Ward and Kalin coordinated small teams to take advantage of these openings, slowly pushing the creatures back into the tunnels and reclaiming key areas of the colony. Each success, though small, boosted morale. Humans were learning to fight the impossible. The creatures responded by becoming more aggressive. They attacked in waves, striking not just with physical force but with psychic influence, creating visions of terror and despair in the soldiers' minds. Some teams reported seeing illusions of fallen comrades, hearing voices calling them into traps. Yet humanity adapted. Soldiers learned to rely on each other, to trust in training, and to focus on objectives rather than fear. Every encounter taught them new strategies, and slowly humans turned what had seemed like chaos into controlled action. As the conflict escalated, Earth's fleet joined the fight in full force. Battleships and fighters arrived in orbit, providing support with precision strikes and supply drops. The galaxy watched as humans coordinated on a scale previously unseen, combining intelligence, courage, and technology to take the fight directly to the creatures. It was no longer a defensive struggle. It had become a counterattack. Humans were showing the galaxy that they were capable of more than survival. They were capable of mastery over even the most alien of threats. During one particularly intense engagement, Ward led a team into the heart of the tunnels. where the largest concentration of creatures had been detected. Using advanced energy traps, careful coordination, and the element of surprise, the team managed to isolate several creatures and neutralize them long enough to gather valuable data. This success marked a turning point. Humanity had learned not just to survive Erebus 9, but to dominate the battlefield through strategy, intelligence, and relentless determination. The psychological effect on the rest of the galaxy was immediate. Reports of human resilience, tactical genius, and raw courage spread quickly. Species that had once laughed at humanity now watched with apprehension. Humans were no longer the fragile newcomers. They were a force that could confront the unknown, adapt rapidly, and strike decisively. The SOS that had initially been ignored had awakened a response that no one could have predicted, a full-scale display of humanity's ingenuity and fearlessness. By the end of the struggle on Erebus 9, the humans had not only recovered vital data, but had also secured a perimeter around the planet. The creatures, though still dangerous, had been driven back into deep tunnels where they could be monitored and studied. Humans had gained something more important than victory: confidence. They understood their enemy, their capabilities, and the power of unity and courage. The battle had transformed them from victims into masters of their destiny. As the human fleet regrouped in orbit, Ward looked out at the planet below. The tunnels were silent, the shadows hiding somewhere in the depths, but humanity had endured. He knew this was only the beginning. Erebus 9 had taught them that the galaxy held threats beyond imagination, but it had also proven that humans could rise to meet them. Admiral Kalen addressed the fleet, his voice calm but resolute. "We came to save our people. We have done more than that. We have shown the galaxy that humanity will not falter, will not yield, and will not be ignored. This is only the beginning." The creatures of Erebus 9, though momentarily contained, had encountered the full force of human resolve. They had learned, perhaps for the first time, that the humans they had underestimated were capable of far more than they imagined. Humanity had answered the SOS, faced the unimaginable, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more dangerous than ever before. In the depths of space, the shadows stirred, but the humans were ready to take the fight beyond Erebus 9 and into the galaxy itself. The battle for Erebus 9 had transformed humanity. What had started as a simple rescue mission had become a full-scale confrontation with forces the galaxy had never imagined. The creatures that had destroyed the colony were unlike anything recorded in history. Shadows that fed on energy, moving through walls, slipping between dimensions, and striking with precision and intelligence. Humanity had learned to fight them, to survive their attacks, and to turn fear into strategy. But the victory on the planet was only the beginning. The humans knew that the creatures were not confined to Erebus 9. If left unchecked, they could spread, threaten other colonies, and plunge the galaxy into chaos. The human leadership made a decision that shocked the Galactic Union. They would not wait for permission, and they would not retreat. President Ariel Lennox authorized the full mobilization of the Earth fleet. Every ship capable of interstellar travel, every crew trained for combat, and every weapon developed for defense or exploration was recalled. Earth became a war hub, with fleets converging, supplies stockpiled, and scientists racing to create tools to fight the unimaginable. Humanity had become a single united force, focused on one goal: to ensure that no colony, no human, and no corner of the galaxy would ever again fall prey to these creatures. The other species in the Galactic Union watched in disbelief. For years, humans had been considered fragile and reckless, tolerated at best and underestimated at worst. Now they were witnessing something unprecedented. Human ships moved with precision and coordination unlike any alien fleet. Their tactics were bold, adaptive, and unorthodox. Where other species would have hesitated, humans pressed forward. Their courage was matched by ingenuity. Scientists on the ships developed energy disruptors that interfered with the creatures' ability to feed, reflective armor that confused their senses, and light traps that could immobilize them temporarily. Every piece of knowledge gained from Erebus 9 was applied immediately. Humanity was no longer responding to a threat. They were dictating the battlefield. The fleet moved beyond Erebus 9, tracing the creatures' energy signatures across the void. It became clear that the creatures were not isolated. They were part of a larger force, spreading through the darkness at the edge of known space. For the first time, humans realized the scope of what they were up against. This was not a single colony lost. This was a threat capable of consuming entire star systems if left unchecked. And yet the fear that might have paralyzed other species fueled humans' determination. Every ship, every soldier, and every scientist understood that failure was not an option. The first engagement beyond Erebus 9 tested the full might of the human fleet. Dozens of creatures emerged from hyperspace distortions, black and shifting, moving faster than any sensors could fully track. They attacked ships with bursts of energy, draining shields and disabling engines. Humans responded with coordinated precision. Energy disruptors fired, confusing the creatures. Fighters moved in patterns designed to split their attention. Battleships unleashed controlled volleys, not to destroy but to manipulate the creatures' behavior. Slowly, humans began to push them back, reclaiming the sector of space they had invaded. As the conflict escalated, the scale of human organization became apparent. Scientists, soldiers, and commanders worked in perfect synchronization. Data from each encounter was instantly analyzed. Patterns were identified and new tactics were implemented in real time. The creatures, formidable as they were, had never faced an opponent so relentless, adaptable, and determined. Each time they struck, humans learned, adjusted, and struck back harder. The galaxy watched as humans, once considered fragile and reckless, became the most formidable force in space. The creatures attempted to retreat, seeking to regroup in another dimension beyond reach. Humans, however, had learned to track the faint energy signatures that betrayed their movements. The fleet pursued them relentlessly, crossing boundaries that had long been considered dangerous or impossible. Ships pushed beyond known space using every innovation at their disposal. Humans were no longer limited by fear, by the Council's rules, or by what others considered impossible. Their courage and ingenuity became a weapon as deadly as any missile or laser. During one critical engagement, a massive cluster of creatures emerged near a colony of an alien species that had previously dismissed humanity as inconsequential. The aliens panicked, retreating from their stations. Humans intervened without hesitation, drawing the creatures into traps they had prepared and neutralizing them with coordinated strikes. The aliens watched in astonishment. They had expected humans to fail, to retreat, to be destroyed. Instead, humans fought with precision, fearlessness, and relentless determination. It was a demonstration of power and intelligence that no one could ignore. Throughout these battles, Commander Ward and other survivors from Erebus 9 played a crucial role. Their first-hand knowledge of the creature's behavior guided human strategy. Soldiers and pilots learned to anticipate the creature's movements, to recognize the subtle cues in their behavior, and to exploit their dependence on energy. Each success built confidence. Humans began to see themselves not as victims responding to an SOS, but as the galaxy's defenders, capable of turning terror into victory. As the conflict drew on, humanity's impact on the galaxy became undeniable. Entire sectors that had once mocked or ignored Earth began to take notice. Aliens who had once laughed at human weakness now watched with awe and fear. The humans had shown that they could respond to any threat, that they could adapt, and that they could strike decisively when the situation demanded. Humanity's reputation shifted in a matter of months from fragile newcomers to a force that even the oldest and most powerful species now respected and feared. The final confrontation occurred near a sector known only in legends, a place at the edge of the galaxy where reality itself seemed thin. The creatures had gathered there, possibly preparing to expand into human-controlled space. The human fleet approached cautiously, but with confidence born of every lesson learned on Erebus 9 and beyond. For the first time, humans were not merely reacting. They were orchestrating the battle. They used bait ships to lure the creatures, traps to immobilize them, and carefully controlled energy surges to weaken their feeding capabilities. Every move was calculated, precise, and ruthless. The creatures fought with ferocity, but humans anticipated every tactic. Each engagement further demonstrated the intelligence, adaptability, and courage of humanity. Fleet commanders coordinated maneuvers across vast distances. Scientists adjusted energy patterns in real time, and soldiers executed operations with unwavering focus. The creatures, for all their alien power, were slowly being pushed back, cornered by a species that refused to be underestimated. After weeks of relentless pursuit and battle, the human fleet emerged victorious. The creatures had been neutralized or driven into a dimension beyond reach. Humanity had not just survived, they had conquered a threat that had seemed unstoppable. The galaxy had witnessed something it would never forget. Humans had answered an SOS, faced a horror beyond imagination, and emerged stronger, smarter, and more fearsome than any other species. When the transmissions from the final battles reached the Galactic Union, the Council was forced to acknowledge a harsh truth. Humans were no longer the fragile newcomers to be tolerated. They were a dominant force, capable of decisive action, adaptive strategy, and unyielding courage. Ambassadors from countless species had to reassess their assumptions. Humanity had not only defended themselves but had saved countless colonies and lives across the galaxy. The SOS that had initially been ignored had become a symbol, a warning of what humanity was capable of when pushed to the brink. Commander Ward, recovered and honored for his bravery, stood on the bridge of a human battleship orbiting the edge of known space. He reflected on everything that had happened: the destruction of Erebus 9, the lessons learned in the tunnels, the relentless pursuit of the creatures, and the battles that had followed. Humanity had transformed. They had answered a cry for help, and in doing so had proven that they were not to be underestimated. He spoke quietly to the crew. "We sent an SOS, and the galaxy learned what it means when humans answer one." The victory was more than military. It was symbolic. Humanity had demonstrated resilience, intelligence, and courage on a scale no one had expected. Colonies across the galaxy began to see Earth not as a minor player, but as a force capable of shaping the course of events. Aliens who had once dismissed humans now approached with caution and respect. Humanity's reputation had changed forever. They were no longer fragile explorers. They were protectors, warriors, and survivors of the unimaginable. The SOS from Erebus 9 had started as a simple call for help, a desperate plea from a small colony on a distant planet, but it had sparked a chain of events that transformed humanity and the galaxy itself. From the quiet halls of the Galactic Council to the battle-scarred tunnels of Erebus 9, every species now knew that humans were different. They adapted, they endured, and when the time came, they struck back with unmatched courage and precision. In the aftermath, humanity consolidated its fleets, rebuilt the destroyed colonies, and studied the creatures in detail. The knowledge gained from these encounters became part of human strategy and defense planning for generations. They had faced a threat unlike any other and survived, emerging stronger than ever. Humanity had answered the call, not just for Erebus 9 but for the galaxy itself, and in doing so, they had earned a place in history as a species that no one could ignore or underestimate. The galaxy would never forget the SOS that had begun it all, the signal that carried fear and desperation, and the humans who had answered it with courage, ingenuity, and relentless resolve. It had changed everything. Humanity had faced the unimaginable, fought through terror, and emerged victorious, leaving the rest of the galaxy with a single, undeniable truth. When humans answer a call for help, the consequences are never small. The galaxy had learned to fear and respect humanity, and nothing would ever be the same again.